Why should you get excited about blockchain? This video doesn't actually explain blockchain. I'll do that in future videos. Here, I'm really just trying to whet your appetite a little bit about why people are so hopeful about blockchain. In particular, why people think it will restructure the economy, disrupt power structures, and reshape the way communities are organized. And I'm not talking about cryptocurrencies, and I'm not talking about the financial applications of blockchain. What I'm talking about is the way that blockchain will restructure communities. And communities includes corporations, social media, not-for-profits, civic organizations, and other organizations that have a mission. First, blockchain has the potential to disrupt the power structure of corporations. And this includes the big four tech monopolies, which are Google, Amazon, Apple, and Facebook. And we know moving forward that whoever owns the big data and the artificial intelligence can put these two things together in a way that would manipulate us. So these big four tech monopolies really need to be disrupted. To think about how the disruption of these corporations might happen, let's imagine the board of directors that currently oversees Facebook. And Facebook, of course, owns some really important big data, such as everything you've clicked on while you're on Facebook, as well as everything you've posted to your page. This board of directors guides Facebook's internal decisions about what to do with your data, and the people on that board of directors are accountable to the shareholders of Facebook. So if they don't do a very good job of making those shareholders money, then they could lose their position on the board. The board is accountable to profit maximization, and this is what needs to change. What if Facebook's board of directors were instead accountable to the users of Facebook? Well, there are some things preventing that from happening at present. It would be pretty difficult for a not-for-profit company to come in and succeed competing with Facebook. Right now, for-profit companies have an advantage given the current economy. But blockchain could change that, and I'll explain how in future videos. This doesn't necessarily mean that blockchain will get rid of the group of people who serve as board of directors. It could. Blockchain might get rid of the board of directors entirely. But another possibility is that blockchain will just change who the board of directors are accountable to and what their goals are. Second, blockchain will give us control over our data. And there's all kinds of data that we need to be careful with. Self-driving car data, social media clicks, medical records, salary data, passwords, bank information, internet browsing history, companies' internal cost structure. Here's the ideal situation about what would happen with sensitive data like this. I would gather up all of my sensitive data into a big box, which might look something like this. And I would put my data box into an empty room and put a sign on the door that said, "No humans allowed." And then I'd give the keys to that room to a robot who is trustworthy and does exactly what I've permitted him to do and nothing else. And maybe other people put their data in that room too, and each person gets to put their own rules on their own data. Someone might write, "Anyone can use my data as long as they pay me $50. Someone else might write, "Only academics can use my data," or else only cancer researchers can use my data. And someone else might say people would have to pass an ethical training to use my data, and then they would have to pay me $500. And the robot would collect everybody's rules and memorize them and execute them perfectly. More about this data room in another video. For now, I'm just trying to give you a way of visualizing what blockchain might make possible. Third, blockchain will offer us new ways of organizing our communities. Think about how many different structures of communities have developed over time. There used to be these small villages with their small village councils, and as the villages grew into towns and then grew into cities, those village councils developed into city governments and then empire governments. And that led to an expansion in the complexity of these governments with new roles and new relationships between those roles. And church governance evolved just like city governance did. The structure of business has also become more complex over time. It used to be that most businesses were just family farms. Businesses eventually added different roles so that people could specialize, but there was one innovation that was particularly meaningful in the world of business: I'll talk more about the word corporation when I do a video specifically on the word distributed, because essentially a corporation is distributed ownership of a business. And the word distributed is pretty important when we're talking about blockchain. For now, I'll just say that the corporation enabled faster innovation when it comes to the history of the way communities are structured. So communities have developed new and creative ways of organizing themselves over time. However, when the internet came on the scene in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was an explosion in the number of different ways that communities organized themselves. All of these brought together communities of people around a particular purpose, but they had to come up with creative ways of structuring social norms and power incentives within their community if they wanted those purposes to be served. Well, blockchain will enable new structures of communities that were not quite possible given just the internet. So I hope you're curious and excited to learn more about blockchain. I should say up front that we can expect some major kerfunkles with blockchain, and especially in these earlier years. I expect data breaches, unintentional consequences, and major disappointments. The hopeful thing about blockchain technology is not that it has arrived on the scene without any flaws. It's that there's some properties of blockchain that make it good for evolving over time, and in particular good for learning from its mistakes. I should also be upfront about my own biases. Because I'm a behavioral economist, I believe that social incentives and human biases will play a big role in determining which blockchains work and which blockchains don't work. Because I'm a healthcare economist, I believe that blockchains will need to take into account the specific regulatory environments that they work within and the quirks of the industries if they really want to disrupt those industries.